So, thank you for coming. I know the nights are starting to get dark in the UK at this time, so appreciate you taking the time to come along. All of these sessions will be recorded and put up on our YouTube channel, so definitely head over there and subscribe. We have all of the previous sessions that we've got up there already, so go take a look at those. I don't think I mentioned very frequently, actually, that we do have a website for Brighton Kotlin. So brightonkotlin.com, everything that you need to get access to is on there. So we've got all the links to the meetup page, the YouTube channel, Twitter, all those kind of things. And we update that with all the kind of latest speaker bios and things like that, as you can see tonight. So head over to brightonkotlin.com and you kind of take a look if you need to get access to anything. So today I did put together a little agenda, but we're going to switch this around a little bit. We weren't sure exactly what time Anton would be able to join us, so we're going to do the JetBrains license giveaway first, but I think we'll do that at the end, just so we can get straight into the talk. Tonight we've got Anton from JetBrains, Kotlin developer advocate, I think is your full title. Right. Going into some detail about Ktor from the ground up. So as always, please feel free to leave any questions you've got in the comments and I can read them out at the end, unless you're happy to kind of put the mic on and speak yourself, by all means. So yeah, tonight, as always, is supported by Silicon Brighton. Steve is here from Silicon Brighton. They really do put a lot of time and effort into supporting not just this meetup, but a whole load of meetups around Brighton and Sussex. So their help in all of this is invaluable. They are also going to be kind of pivotal maybe next year, maybe when we kick off in January, we might start doing hybrid events. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing people face to face again, maybe get the pizzas and the beers in. And we'll do a hybrid event where we'll stream online and have people in the same room together. So, Steve, do you want to jump in and kind of say a bit about Silicon Brighton?
Yeah, definitely. Cheers, Lee. Yeah, goodness me, can't wait till we can all get back in person again, and that'd be absolutely brilliant. And yeah, just want to say just massive thanks to everyone for coming along today, especially you, Anton. Really great of you to provide us with some of your time, mate. We really do appreciate it. Sounds like you've been busy today already, chatting away. So appreciate you taking some time out of your evening. I'll just give any of you that are new to us just a little bit of background to Silicon Brighton. We're a community-led initiative to support digital growth across the South Coast. We began 2 years ago now, so we've been going for 24 months, which is brilliant, by working with local groups to help raise their profile and provide individuals, just like everyone here, with opportunities for networking, training, upskilling and development, really just to try and help everyone benefit through the sharing of expertise and the opportunity to form new connections and partnerships and make friends, really. So far, we've run and supported over 150 events, given a platform to hundreds of speakers to share their knowledge. And yeah, look, I just hope everyone enjoys today. If you want to find out more about how you can contribute to the work that we do, then please visit siliconbrighton.com. From there, you can join our community hub. You can reach out to myself, Kieran, any of the team. And yeah, you can find out all about all the other events that we've got coming up. And a few of those have started back in person already, actually. So we've got a few coming up in November. So if any of you can make it along to those, that'd be brilliant. But hopefully Brighton Kotlin will be Jan. That's the plan. And yeah, that's it from me. Thanks again, Anton. Cheers, Lee. And yeah, looking forward to this.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Anton, I'll stop sharing and pass it over to you.
Thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to speak at the events for the groups where people who are interested in Kotlin and some of the specifics, like inviting me, and I'm always happy to join. Oh yes, today it's my third meetup actually, counting in the Kotlin Online event that is happening right now. Like we decided to change the format this year to spread the sessions in time, not just squeeze them into a couple of days. So today we had Sebastian Deleuze talking about Spring Native with Kotlin, and that was a very nice session. And I just joined from the other conference that is happening currently online in St. Petersburg, actually, also talking about Kotlin a lot. So bear with me if I suddenly start losing my voice. It's because of that, because I was talking basically 4 hours straight. So you can see my screen, obviously, and we are talking about Ktor from ground up. That's the name. Basically, it's the introduction into the framework, and I will cover some of the details, but obviously I will not go deep into the internals of the framework, how it's built, some of the advanced use cases. This is not the aim of this presentation. What I want to do, and my goal is to actually introduce you to that framework and maybe hear back your opinions, concerns, and so on. And a little bit about myself. I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains. For the past 2 years, I've been working with Kotlin team mostly, and before that, I was a developer advocate in TeamCity team. You know, the continuous integration server built by JetBrains as well. And well, my goal is to actually work with server side. So like we have a few folks in the team for Kotlin advocacy, and each of us has a specialization. Like someone is working with mobile, someone is working more with front end or libraries, and so my specialization is backend and cloud development, backend frameworks, also some language features. So we intersect a little bit, but we still have our own, let's say, playground for the language. And my job is actually to learn something from the developers and go and talk about it to the other developers. That's exactly what I do here right now. I talked to Kotlin developers and Ktor developers, and now I'm talking to you and passing you some knowledge that I have learned from them. It doesn't mean then that I'm an expert. I'm not writing the compiler. I'm not writing libraries or core libraries of the language. I'm just an average developer. I have a development background for 20 years, been programming in Java, and switched to Kotlin like 4 or 5 years ago when I joined JetBrains, actually. So one of the things, or one of the questions that people have when they start using Kotlin or consider switching to Kotlin from Java is how do I build a server-side application? And obviously, if you have Java background, you immediately think that, hey, I need some framework, because the language does not include the framework like intrinsically. You need to get some framework from as a dependency, build your application inside the framework or around it, the way the framework mandates. Like depending on the framework type, of course. Like if you are using Spring, for instance, then you build your components, you start Spring framework, and your components work inside the framework. Or if you prefer some of the light frameworks, like lightweight frameworks, minimalistic frameworks, micro frameworks, the way you call it, like doesn't matter. Then you use them as toolkits, and you use them as libraries. Basically, start your application from command line, like, or from the main method, and well, there you go. So this is the question that I get sometimes, and if you look at the landscape of the frameworks that are capable to work with Kotlin, it's actually almost the same, like 99% the same list that you get with Java, because Kotlin was actually designed as an alternative JVM language. It wasn't designed like lately. It has been a lot of talks, or I had a lot of talks to the folks who are still thinking that Kotlin was designed for Android. That's not true. It was designed as an alternative to Java to run on the servers, and then it switched. It also like incorporated the capability to compile to some targets besides JVM bytecode, right? So in Java ecosystem, the main framework today is Spring. So obviously you should be able to use Kotlin with Spring. And if you go to the website, you will find that the documentation, the samples are actually duplicated in Java and Kotlin. And in the framework itself, there are plenty of extensions specifically for Kotlin developers. Like, for instance, due to some language syntax features, some of the APIs don't look as nice if we use them as is, like for instance, JDBC template or something like this. Like you probably are familiar with this kind of APIs. And for those APIs specifically, Spring Framework provides the extensions that make your Kotlin program look a bit nicer when you use those APIs. I will not dive into those today, but you can learn about them on our YouTube channel. I'm actually have a section about Kotlin with Spring. We call it Springtime in Kotlin. So if you go to youtube.com/Kotlin, you will find a lot of playlists there, depending on the topic, like standard library or server-side development or webinars and so on. And you can find Springtime in Kotlin there, and I'm explaining some of the specifics in that channel. So, and obviously there are other frameworks, like depending on the type of the application you're building, and most of them are like big frameworks, like full stack frameworks, but also there are micro frameworks like Javelin, for instance, or Spark. And if you go to their websites, you will see that they also are like stating that they are not just Java frameworks, but also Kotlin frameworks. That's also interesting. And there are also frameworks that were developed in Kotlin as well, like HTTP4K or Ktor itself is also developed in Kotlin, but other micro frameworks are developed in Java. That's the difference. So Ktor, we are talking about it today. It's a micro framework. It's more like a toolkit or a library for building HTTP applications, and it's built by a team at JetBrains. It started as basically a test bed for Kotlin coroutines to test the latest and greatest in the library, in the core libraries, in the language, in the coroutines, to verify if the new things or new features that we bring into the language and the core library are good enough to build server-side applications, and not just with the existing Java frameworks, but by itself, right? We build this framework in the language and the core libraries, and then we can use this framework for building basically our own stack. And it's a very minimal framework, and we'll see how minimal it is. In fact, it's not just a server-side framework, it also has a client side. So if it's an open source framework, it has Apache license, you can build server-side applications and client-side applications with that. And it's actually multi-platform. So the client side, the HTTP client that Ktor provides, is fully multi-platform already today. And it's pretty popular in the Kotlin mobile multi-platform or multi-platform mobile. I'm actually mixing up the names here. But so in mobile applications where you target Android and iOS, you can use this client and target both platforms. And in fact, you can actually transpile your code into JavaScript as well and use this client there as well. The server part is JVM only today, but in 2.0 that is coming soonish. Let's say we expect beta by the end of the year, I hope. It was announced this week that it will happen like in 4 or 5 weeks, but it always depends on how the things go and how stable they are. And the server will be targeting native as well, so you would be able to compile your Ktor plus Kotlin applications into native code and run without JVM. So we are yet to figure out the use cases for that, but it's a very interesting development. And I pretty often get the question as well, like, who uses Ktor as a framework? Because it's not as popular as Spring. Then the question is totally legal. I mean, why would I even think of using some framework that nobody uses? And we are actually building at JetBrains, we are not just building the framework, but we are building our products with that as well. I know a few big companies who are using Ktor as well, but I'm not listing them here. But this is the product that we are building at JetBrains. It's called Space. It's like a collaboration space where you have Git hosting, chats, issue tracking, everything. So it's like a teamware for your project, and it's built entirely in Kotlin and Ktor. So it's powered by Ktor. Obviously, on the client side, we use Ktor HTTP client to communicate with the backend, and the backend is JVM backend running Ktor applications. So if we talk about Ktor as a project today, it's not just framework and the client, it's also tooling around it that is provided inside IntelliJ IDEA. So you can install Ktor plugin into your IDE in IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate Edition. And the plugin provides not only the wizard, but also some smart features like smarter auto-completion specific to Ktor, or some inspections that are inspecting your application code in regards to best practices or configuration, specifically for Ktor things, right? And then there are some extra capabilities that the IDE provides for other frameworks. Then we can take advantage of the platform features and provide that for Ktor users as well. So let me see. So this is how the hello world looks like. Main function, we are starting the embedded server on port 8080. Like, obviously, if we are saying that we start the engine, like the embedded server based on the Netty engine, then pretty legal question is, what are the other options? And there are plenty of other options like Tomcat or Jetty. And we also have our own engine, which is CIO, and C there stands for coroutines. And that's the engine that enables the server, like in the future, hopefully in some of the updates of 2.0, that is the engine that will enable us to make the server side of Ktor applications multi-platform, to be able to compile the same code into the JVM bytecode and also native code as well. Then, fixed port we can actually replace with the random port. If we say that it can be 0, then at the start of the framework will figure out some random port that is free, that is available on your machine, and start it there. And then we have a small DSL that defines routing in your application. So in this specific case, we say in that block, this is the block that defines routes. We have some request mappings there, get methods, post methods, put methods, and so on, delete. And obviously there is a path for that specific mapping. And then we write the response, and the response is actually a suspended function. When we invoke some of the functions on the call, that is the implicit variable inside that block. the whole framework is built with coroutines in mind. So if you are familiar with coroutines, that's good. If not, I'm not explaining them today. It's better to look up the documentation, look up other presentations. So I just say that Ktor uses coroutines extensively. We will see that in the demo as well, but I'm not explaining coroutines, how they work today. And there are a few dependencies that you get when you generate the project from the project wizard. This is basically the two files you get when you generate a Ktor project with IntelliJ. So the question is, what can I do with this framework, or how can I do something with this framework? Because it looks so minimal. It's just like a main method. We open up the port and handle the requests. And usually you have some things you have to implement in your application, like logging, persistence, testing, views, like authentication or something like this. And Ktor today provides, let's say, integrations for some of the libraries that help you implement this functionality in the application. But the approach or the philosophy behind building the applications with Ktor is that you use some other libraries for the specific task. Like you don't get, it's not a full stack framework. It's not like a full framework that provides a recipe for every task at hand, like Spring does, for instance. With Ktor, you are more like on your own by choosing which library you want to use for which purpose and how you want to structure the application. It's just that the framework provides some modules to integrate with with these libraries, and it's a very limited set actually. So if you want to talk to database, you just pick your own favorite library, and if you want to add logging, then you just add some library, or if you want serialization, authentication, and so on. Authentication is, by the way, one of the features that I think this is where you don't start picking the library, but you rely on the framework, because this feature comes from the framework. But in the other places, you start choosing some libraries. That's the I think this is the core difference between those full stack frameworks and minimal frameworks like Ktor, because this is where this debate happens, like which one is better, and do I want a lighter framework, or do I want a framework that provides a solution for everything? But in this case, like a legal question is, what does Ktor provide if I have to choose everything? And why do I want it at all? And let's talk first, how does the application look, like Ktor application look at like 10,000 feet view, like what it is. Like we have seen the Hello World application in the beginning. It doesn't use any modules, but a bigger application of Ktor will consist, most likely it will consist of some modules that are optional, but let's pretend that there are modules. There are not like special jars or anything. This is just a convention. We can say that this function is a module. We can define it using the configuration. Let's just stick with that. That's a fact. I will not demonstrate that at this moment, but I will see in the demo. So a Ktor application is a set of modules, and a module is sort of a pipeline where we have an incoming request that should pass through multiple stages, and each stage might be either routing, like that's almost inevitable that we have routing in our module, and the routing should route your request to some of the handlers. And the application logic, obviously, if we write the application, we have some custom logic there. Otherwise, why do we even care building the application? And then we can add more features or plugins into that pipeline. In fact, even routing is actually a plugin in Ktor by itself. So today in 1.0 or like 1.x, version of the framework, we usually refer to them as features, but in 2.0 we are going to rename them into the plugins. So this terminology is a little bit intermixed. Even today in the documentation, if you go and see, they mention features first and then correct themselves, saying that feature, but it will be plugin. Okay, let's think of those terms as synonyms, right? And those features might be like call logging or authentication or some database transaction even, or whatever, like whatever feature you need in this pipeline. And those features can be put like in the beginning of the request or after the application logic at the very end. You have the freedom for that, like as a feature author, you have the freedom. Then we have, at the end, we have the response. So that's the module, and we can have multiple modules in the application. To learn about those features, what is the list? I will not go through all of them today because I find it a little bit boring, because you can look it up in the documentation. You open up the Ktor's website. On the left-hand side, you will see the list of those features, and whatever name you find attractive, you can read about that feature. So this is the features list or plugins list, whatever you want to call it. In fact, routing, like I will explain routing on the slides a little bit. So that's the DSL, right? We have seen it in the Hello World application. This is a little bit bigger snippet of code. So routing can be also nested. We can have different methods for the specific route. Like in here, we have widgets path, and then for that widget path, we have get, post, and put. And if we want to refer to some widget by ID, then we have a nested route that actually results in concatenation of those paths. And so we have widget/ID, for instance. So that's very simple. So it's pretty simple to build applications like this. And one of the things that is useful learning Ktor, I think it's by example and looking at the code. And we have actually a pretty big Ktor samples repository. Like there are multiple interesting projects in the especially in the generic samples directory. And for like learning about the framework step by step, we also have hands-on section on the playground. So if you go to play.kotlinlang.org, you will find a few tutorials in the hands-on section that are implemented using Ktor today. Also, like sometimes tutorials are not enough. You want a fully fledged, structured example of a project, and this is where the community helps. I think you can find interesting templates for Ktor projects on the webs, and I find this Richard Harrison's Ktor exposed starter pretty useful for building small applications with databases, and because it immediately provides you with this kind of recipe of how to structure your application by packages, and then adding database support, adding some other libraries for specific tasks, and there is also like a database migration. So it's a very interesting template. Today, I'm going to build a very small application because I will be typing, and I'm pretty slow at typing. The idea helps, of course. That is a chat, a WebSockets chat. WebSockets is the feature that people like about Ktor. That's why I thought it will be interesting to do a demo about this one. And I will add persistence. Some of the code I have is already written, so it would go faster, so I don't have to type it. Actually, I will explain this project structure at first. So in my project view, I hope you can see it well. I have two modules, one for the server-side application with Ktor, and the other one is the client. It will be a command line client to connect to the chat and interact with it, right, using WebSockets. And I'm using Ktor, obviously, in both parts of the project. Then let's look at the server-side module first. We have a pretty familiar project structure here, like Maven project structure, basically, with packages. We have Ktor sources here. Kotlin sources. We are not going to look into the tests today. Let's look into the Gradle build first. So we have this core libraries that I have listed on the slide at first, like for the Hello World application. Basically, that's the almost minimal set of libraries you will have when you build something with Ktor, besides WebSockets, right? WebSockets I have added explicitly. And then for the second part, for the persistence, I have the rest, right? We need to add exposed library, not that like we need to, but I have chosen to add exposed here, and I'm using H2 database. Sometimes I want to switch to Postgres, and obviously we can add some connection pooling and maybe cache a bit later. But let's start with simple things, right? So the application looks a little bit different. The entry point looks a little bit different. Like if you remember the Hello World application, we had a main function and we started the embedded server and set the and we defined the engine, the HTTP engine, like Netty, for instance. In here, we immediately say that main function is actually the main function from the engine itself. What is the difference? The difference is that for the embedded server, we are not using a configuration file. If you are starting the application using the engine, the specific engine here, like the one from Netty package, it means that we actually are using application configuration file, and that is the application.conf. That's a HOCON format. Where the minimal configuration consists of this deployment part, which is pretty simple. You just define the port there. Well, I think it's a little bit unfortunate that the format is like this. I think it could be defined in a more friendly manner without specifying this port twice here, but this is for historical reasons. I hope the team will improve that. So today, if you want to define some fixed port, you have to define it first. And then if you want to override it with the system property, you have this kind of, or actually environment variable, you have this kind of syntax afterwards. So you redefine this port if you want to assign like some environment, some value from the environment. And then comes this block of code, the application block, where we define a list of modules. And the modules are like comma separated list of functions. So if I go to this function definition, I will get to my code here, right, in the file. So I can actually have as many modules as I want. Why is it good? Sometimes you want to keep the code together, and by using the configuration, just define which modules should start on a specific instance. So I think that was the design decision behind this behind this feature. All right. So we were saying that we are going to build a WebSocket chat, and for that we need a feature called WebSockets. We already have it in the class path. We have defined this dependency in the Gradle configuration file, and in Ktor, we actually don't rely on the class path definition. We actually have to say that, hey, I want to use this feature. I want to install this plugin into my application, and for that we obviously have install function, where we provide the feature name as object. And now one of the features that I want to show you here is how the plugin auto-completion works. So if I choose a specific feature like WebSockets here, I complete, it will actually generate a few attributes for that specific feature. That is, this kind of completion is provided by the Ktor plugin. So it's not something that is provided by IntelliJ itself. Just to add some arguments why the plugin is a good thing in the IDE. Okay, so we install the plugin. We can define some attributes, some specific configurations for that plugin, and I'm not going to go deep into those, like what every attribute means. They are just there. You can read up the documentation if you want to, and then we can define routing, and in that routing we can define the endpoints, and one of the endpoints will be that WebSocket endpoint. So WebSocket, let's call it chat. So it will be a chat endpoint, and this is where the things will be happening. So what are we able to do here? So for instance, like first of all, the hints on the right tell you the context, right? We are now inside that block. Everything happens within WebSocket server session. So if we do something here, that's the socket session. We can send events, we can receive events, we can do something about it. Since we have a chat, we need to keep track of our users who connect to our chat. So for instance, I will register all my connections. Like the connection is actually my own class. This is just a wrapper around the default WebSocket session where I give a name to every connection, like user, and just increment the counter. So if a new user connects, he gets a name user1, user2, user3, and so on. So I will keep track of those users in this collection. And whenever I connect, I actually have to create a connection, right? Connection, this, and this is actually the session, because we already are in the context of the session. So val c, and I need to register the connection in the set, right? So the user has connected now. Now within the scope of this block in the session, we have a channel, or we have like not really a channel. I don't know. I call it a channel that is called incoming. So that's, yes, it's a channel, receive channel, which receives frames. And the best way to, like, there is actually methods like receive, right? But that will be like a single receive. This is not something you want to do in a chat. We want to continuously receive something, and for that, the channel is actually iterable. You can iterate over this channel. So if I use iteration on the incoming channel, I'm able to receive the frames like continuously and do something with them. And what we need to do with the frames, it will be a chat, so it will be text. Frames might have different type, like it can be binary, it can be some command, for instance. In this case, since we only want to work with text, I need to validate that the frame is actually of type text. So, and if not, then I just continue in the loop, right? So if the frame is of type text, we can actually read the text, right? So probably extract a variable. And now if someone sent a message which is text, right, we need to broadcast this message to the other participants. So for instance, we can iterate over the list of connections, and for each connection we will call send, right? It send session send, and send the text, something like this. Should be okay, I think. Should work. Like just for the usability, I probably want to greet the user. Whenever someone connects, I want to say at least hello, and be nice. Say hello to the new guests. So for instance, I could send welcome to the chat. There, like we can say also how many users there are, like connections, size, users are online, something like this. And well, one of the things I find not that convenient when working with protocols is that the client for that protocol doesn't tell you where do you have to handle the exceptions, right? In Kotlin, we don't have checked exceptions, and this is the place where you start thinking maybe checked exceptions in Java are a pretty good thing. Actually, this is just my opinion. Some colleagues are not agreeing with me, but this is the place where I have to decide myself how do I handle the exceptions, and if there are any exceptions happening when I interact with the API. But I just know that I probably want to handle this part, like sending and receiving messages, like put it into try catch finally block, for instance, and print some messages if something happens, and at the end I need to deregister my connection from the connection set. So if my client disconnects, I would finally like deregister the connection. So for instance, I could do it like this: connections minus C, and I could also print out the debug message as well, just for myself. C name disconnected, something like this. So I hope that this simple application works. Now, what we have learned by writing this code? First of all, we have to install the feature. Whatever we use, you can't just rely that this feature is in the class path. We have to be explicit about it. Then we already have seen routing for just the normal HTTP functions and methods, and now we have seen WebSockets feature, right? Let's actually verify how does it work. I hope I didn't make any mistakes. If you spot any mistakes, just let me know. No, it's the third meetup today. Maybe I'm not that. I don't have that much, mental power left to actually spot the mistakes. Let's see. I'm building the chat. I hope it will start. Meanwhile, I will open a WebSockets client so that we could verify if it works. Let me see. Okay, the application is running. Let me see if I can get the browser window in front of me. Okay. All right, yeah, that's the window I'm looking for. So I have a plugin in my browser that is called browser. And now what I need to do, I know that my application runs on localhost 8080. I need to connect. By the way, the path I need to include as well, the chat, connect. The connection has opened. We have one user is online, and we can start sending messages. For some reason, this client requires me to write messages in a JSON format. So let it be message, hello, send, boom, it works. Let's see if the if we can connect twice to the same endpoint. WebSockets localhost /8080 chat, connect to the second time, and now we have 2 users online. Perfect. So we are really registering our connections. We can probably add a message, hey there. Let's see. We can send. Why does it do it like this? Yep. So we in the first window we can see the message by the other user. I didn't include the name of the user, right? So we can actually fix that. So whoever is telling me the message, that's the message I should include. Like I should include the username as well. Message equals something like this. The connection name and text. So that's the message I need to include. All right, we will restart it later. Let's see, I have tested my service using some browser interface. Let's try building a chat client using the Ktor itself. So that is going to be a command line client, right? So we have a main function and we have dependency on Ktor in our build file. That's just the client dependency, and we need WebSockets. So we just have 2 dependencies for this specific project. Very simple. We only have a main function. We already learned that there is some HTTP client. So obviously discovering the name will not be too complicated. So client, HTTP client. That's what I need. HTTP client. And it works pretty much the same way as we did for the server. We have to define a feature, like whichever we are using. So we decided that we are using Ktor client and we need to enable that specific plugin for WebSockets. So install. So the API is very familiar already from the server side part. We just need to enable WebSockets here. That's it. We have a client that supports WebSockets. Now we can use this client to run a WebSocket session. Interesting. The thing is, the method here receives a few arguments. There are actually multiple functions in that client in the API, and I will use the one that where I can specify the port. The port is 8080. If we go and look up at the definition, there are some things already specified for me by default, like for instance HTTP method I don't need to specify because this is exactly what I would be using in this demo. I need HTTP method get. I need to connect to the local host. I will not specify that explicitly. The default port is actually 0, so I'm going to specify that, and the path is not what I need. I need to redefine it as well. Path is going to be chat. right? And now the whole interaction will be happening within this block, and the block is the context of this WebSocket session, again, the same way as we had in the server side. The IDE tells me that, hey, there is a suspended function, WebSocket, and you need to run it either in the main that should be also suspendable, or you can use scope like run blocking, for instance. So we can put this into run blocking because this is the only command we actually will start. Now, what will be happening here? It's a command line client. It will connect to the server using this call. And now when we connect, we have to interact with the service somehow and continuously sending and receiving the messages, right? So what it means continuously, meaning while true, right? Infinitely. Now, I will demonstrate just a naive way of building this kind of thing. For instance, like we need to read the messages, right? We have the incoming channel, we receive a frame. Hopefully the frame is a text frame. And if it's a text frame, then we can read the text. No, sorry, I actually want to receive the messages. So let me first, no, not receive, but send the messages. Sorry, let me read the line first. Read line. Extract it into line, and it might be null. By the way, in the new version of Kotlin, we have readLN, which is getting rid of this possible null value in the result. And let it be empty string. So if we read the line, then if the line is not null, if line, okay, we already tested that. We need to send it, right? We need to send it, send line. So we read it from the command line as input, we send it to the service, and all the other clients should receive it from the service. And now when we read in the messages, then we receive some frame, we check if it's a text, and then we just print it out. Frame read text. Now I won't even start it here, but if you're familiar with coroutines or like, you probably can spot the problem here. Read line is a blocking call. The application will wait until we input some value there. It means that we cannot receive anything until we send the message. And that's not good, right? We want to be able to continuously receive the messages and send the messages whenever we want to. So that won't work. We need to do that asynchronously. And if I say asynchronously, meaning that we will apply coroutines here. So what can we do? We need to do that continuously, right? So that will happen in the loop. This part is totally legal inside the loop, and this part should be separate. We can use the same trick as we used in the server side. We can iterate over the incoming channel. Iterate over the incoming channel and do pretty much the same as we did before, just like this, right? And read line, for instance, if we want to, maybe we can have some commands as well, like get history or exit or something like this. We could have this logic in here, but these two loops are still kind of no, they are not asynchronous. This part is still blocking. We can move this operation out into a coroutine, and we can launch this part of code as a coroutine. So we can use launch function for that and put that block of code like this. Job value, so it's those are incoming messages, incoming messages. And then we can port this as outgoing messages, and also launch as a coroutine, launch like this. Good. And the only thing that is left is that we need to join somehow on this ongoing part. And because it can exit, and it can exit by using the logic like this, like line. If line is exit, then return from the launch, right? So we would exit this coroutine and jump here, and then we need to cancel the other coroutine as well, incoming, and cancel, and join. That would be everything that we need from this client. So everything happens asynchronously. Nothing blocks. We are not blocking the incoming messages by reading in the input from the command line. Everything should be great. What we can do better here is launch this code in like extract this code into some meaningful part I have prepared here, and that will be like a suspended function in this case. So pretty much the same code, right? We have iteration over the incoming channel, sending and printing the messages the same way, just we don't need to write this code here. We would have those two functions like this. Actually, vice versa. We need to output the messages, and what was the other one? Input messages. So that would be like a final solution to this. And on the left hand side, you can see all the suspended functions marked with this arrow, saying that basically this is the part where we can block and suspend the whole execution. So let's maybe test this a little bit. Like, does it work even? Like whatever we just wrote. 3 users are online. That's nice. Hello. It tells me back that something is happening, and the others can see this message as well. Now, what is missing here is history. It seems I have spent so much time on typing this code, so I won't be like adding the lines one by one. I will rather show you the code that I already have for persistence. So for persistence, as I said, you may use any library that you use in your Java application, but somehow people like to use exposed in their Ktor projects. It's just somehow turned out historically, because exposed is also created by someone at JetBrains. It's basically just another open source project that is maintained by some internal team, and they use it for their own purposes. It's not a core library. That's what I want to say. It's not developed by the language team. It's just someone, and that someone happened to be an employee of JetBrains. But still, for people, it seems like it's like official library, and they start adding it to the projects, and somehow it turned out that exposed is pretty popular for Ktor projects. So let's take a look at the Gradle file again, just to recap we have some exposed dependencies, the core, the DAO, JDBC integration, and then we have database drivers as well, cache and connection pooling. And this is the pattern that you will actually see in the project templates anywhere at GitHub or even in our tutorials as well. We use this DAO facade interface where you implement your business functions, not really implement, you define, you declare those business functions, and then you implement them using this DAO facade impl class. This is like a recipe that you will find in all the tutorials and Ktor sample projects. The part that is needed to bootstrap the library and the connections and the configurations, you have to write this by hand. This is something that framework does not provide. There is no specific integration or plugin for exposed in Ktor today, but maybe it's actually on the roadmap for 2.0 or 3.0 even, where they want to make this experience a bit more, smooth, so that, okay, if you are building Ktor application, there is a high chance that you want to use exposed, and then there is an integration module for that, but currently it's not there. So to actually bootstrap the database, I need to call this function where I read in some configuration from by using the APIs, like application config is actually the class or the interface provided by Ktor. So I would do it like this. Within the scope of the module, the module itself is an extension function. It means that whatever is happening here happens within the context of the application, and the application provides some environment, and that environment has a config. So initialize database, init database. This is the argument that we need for that, right? Because the init database function needs to read in the configuration file for the URL, driver name, whatever you use, whatever you configure, and then call this exposed library provided database class, like for a connection, to initialize the connection internally, and we don't need to pass some variables around our application to actually work with it. This transaction block is also an API provided by the exposed library. This is where we just say that, okay, we create this messages object, and messages object actually represents a table. This is the DSL provided by exposed library again. And this is where we just declare our tables, we model them, and then exposed is capable of translating those definitions into DDL, data definition language, create the tables, and then we will work with those tables by using, exposed provided DSL for accessing the database, and that DSL is used to generate queries like insert statements, select statements, whatever. So we initialize the database. Now we can just create an instance of that DAO, okay, DAO impl facade, and that's it. We don't need to provide any configuration there. We don't need to provide any properties. Maybe it depends on case by case, but in this simple example, we just need to create an instance and use it. Nothing else. And for instance, we would, like, when we receive the message, we want to persist it. Okay, DAO save message. Good, that's it. Or if we connect, we want to get all the messages, like as history, right? I want to see the history, what was happening in the chat, like DAO get messages, and then session, actually just for each of the messages I need to send all the messages there, right? session send it like this. So we can restart our application probably. Let me restart and see if, okay, it restarts. It initialized the connection. There is like a Hikari pull startup. The application is running. We can connect to the application using the command line client again and get the messages from the history. I have like a database file from my previous runs, and it holds a few messages. So when I connect, it immediately selected those messages from the database and sent it to me, right? So simple. So let's I think wrap it up here. My goal wasn't actually to write a very beautiful code here. You can see it's not like a very beautiful application in this try, catch, and finally blocks and so on. You can improve it. You can extract functions. But my goal was to introduce you to Ktor and expose the API. Like in Ktor, you have to implicitly or explicitly add plugins, enable those features, and then by doing that, you can access, depending what the plugin does or the feature does, you can use those features provided by the plugin. Like in our case, it was with WebSockets. There is a client API. The client API looks very similar to what you do on the server. You have to install the feature or enable it. You define a session. Like it's very similar, right, on the client side and on the server side. So in Tutorial, for instance, we have some common code coming, like you could reuse on the client and on the server. So the API for some of the features will be like shareable. You can share it between the client and the server. Even okay, and for exposed, you can use it as a library, and it even feels like programming 15 years ago when I didn't have Spring, when now Spring provides everything, and here I have some singleton sitting somewhere, and I am accessing that using some common variable that I have to pass around if I need to, but that looks pretty simple, and it's pretty convenient for small applications. What I also wanted to highlight on the left, those arrows tell you that everything is asynchronous. The code that you have written is not blocking anywhere. In our function here, even the database access, thanks to coroutines, can actually be put into a connection pool. Using the connection pool, we make it asynchronous here as well. So with that, my demo is done, and I hope it was interesting and useful. It probably was a little bit hectic. If you have any questions for me, regarding some materials around Kotlin, Ktor, maybe Kotlin with Spring, and something around server side, you can reach out to me at Twitter. The personal messages are open, so just ping me if you need to. You can find the slides from various presentations at my speaker deck account, and if you are interested in Ktor, well, there is a website, but you can get around it, just by downloading Ktor plugin in your IntelliJ and start out right there. Who reads documentation anyway before there are any problems? So yes, if you have any questions for me right now, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Anton. That was really, really good. I got a few questions. You mentioned Spring quite a bit in that conversation. Are there kind of specific use cases you might want to choose Ktor for over Spring, or is it just kind of whatever you want to play with at the time.
I think this is my personal bias. I think today, if I had to build, let's say I'm building a commercial project and or for some client, probably I will start. Spring will still be my first choice, but probably it's just a personal bias because I know Spring better, or I think I know Spring better. Ktor is also interesting, but I still have a feeling that there is a lot of work to be done to make it very pleasant framework. The goal for the team, as they say, is to make like HTTP applications easy. Like Ktor was initially created with a slogan, like a framework for connected apps, right? So if you need to quickly spin up some microservice, or like a very, very small service with a minimal, effort and not so great functionality, then it should be convenient with Ktor, and it really is. So if I don't have to, I don't know, even like, I don't know, it's like choosing between Chef and Puppet, for configuration, or it's more like a personal preference, whether you prefer to have a list of recipes available for you immediately, or to build those recipes yourself. I think the full stack frameworks like Spring make you very productive if you know them, but minimal frameworks like Ktor make you better developer because you have to make your choices and learn about those components that you will use a bit more than when you use them inside Spring.
I guess that's one of the double-edged swords of Spring, isn't it? People complain about everything that happens magically in the background, and others see that as a massive benefit. I guess this is kind of what we see with Ktor. You're very explicit in what you're doing. You tell it what you want to install and what you want to use.
There's like I see benefits of both approaches. I see myself developing a big, let's say, e-commerce application with Spring, and doing some side projects with Ktor. This way, kind of improving myself as a developer, because I learn more about the internals and how the libraries work, and what should exactly I be writing for those libraries. And then with Spring, I'm just more productive on a larger scale when I have like more developers in the team. Although this argument doesn't hold with micro frameworks either, because like if you build a team, you can still use micro frameworks and agree within the team how you do things, right? So I don't know. I don't really have a good answer here. Like I think it still boils down to this kind of, is it the standard? Is it the industry standard? Is Kotlin industry standard, right? Today, if you go to some company and to some CTO and argue about whether or not you should be using Kotlin or Java, then Java is obviously more popular, like by the numbers, and then Kotlin is not an industry standard, you will choose Java. Choosing between Spring and Ktor will be kind of the same discussion.
Sure. Could I just refresh my memory? I think you said that Ktor Client is multi-platform.
Yes.
But Ktor server isn't yet.
Yes. And it's going to be in some update of 2.0. But obviously, if you have been following the Kotlin development, you probably have seen the blog posts about the new memory model for Kotlin native. So obviously, before that one is finalized, we cannot, really hope that Ktor will be native, like out of experimental, right? So even if we add multi-platform support for Kotlin server, it will first be experimental for some time, then it will move to alpha or beta, and it will take some time anyway. But it's just a very interesting development that is happening.
Okay, cool. So I guess you guys use Ktor to build space. Are there other kind of sizable projects using Ktor that you?
We have a lot of internal development, like pretty much all the infrastructure that we have for JetBrains. JetBrains is more than 1,500 people, like many projects. The number of products is actually much larger than you see on our website. We have a lot of internal products as well, and they are built with Ktor. Some of them are built with Ktor because we are like a technology company. We provide tools for developers who work with those technologies. We need to dog food even like not only our frameworks, but also other frameworks as well. So some of the projects are built with Ktor. So some of the projects are built with Spring.
Okay. Excellent. That's really awesome. Thank you for your time tonight. I do personally have a geeky fascination with building command line utilities. So I think Ktor Client might be my new thing that I play with.
Yes, the CLI clients for communicating with some services. This is something that could be useful for you.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Anton. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and have a nice evening.